Japan's third-largest steelmaker, Kobe Steel, admitted that a snowballing falsified data scandal had affected around 500 customers. What ongoing effects will the scandal have on the company and the industry? The Kobe scandal has affected customers including Boeing in the US and other overseas companies. How will Japanese steelmakers' overseas reputation and markets be affected? Made in Japan has earned its name through decades of hard work and a spirit of precision admired worldwide. What are the challenges now facing the Japanese manufacturing industry? How can its reputation be revived? The Kobe scandal is just one of many recent missteps. Do Japan's industrial woes create an opportunity for industrial products made in China?
Kobe Steel's data fabrication scandal has affected a wide range of manufacturers, sending the company's stock price into a tailspin. While companies ranging from Japanese defense to Shinkansen bullet train manufacturers to airplane and automakers worldwide are dealing with the fallout. And with recent problems for other major companies, the reputation of Made in Japan brand itself is now facing serious challenges. How have these scandals come about, and what are the challenges that Japanese manufacturing is facing? What lessons can Chinese companies learn from all these? To talk about the issue and much more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. He Weiwen, Senior Fellow of the Center for China and Globalization, and Yoichi Shimasu, former editor of the Japan Times, and Andy Mok, founder and managing director of Red Pagoda Resources. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yuan. So why don't we start with you, Yoichi?
Oh, sure. Yeah, all right.
This third biggest steelmaker in Japan, Kobe Steel, admitted it falsified data in order to boost its production and sales. But it had more than 100 years of history of operation. Why did it do that?
Yeah, it was a very reputable company at one time, behind the massive shipbuilding boom that especially centered in the Kobe, Osaka area. Standards have fallen not just recently, but for decades. And I think one of the triggers for that was the easy access without copyright from technology from the former Soviet Union when it collapsed. In fact, Shinzo Abe's first job was at Kobe Steel. And he was involved in...
He worked there in the 1970s.
In the late 70s, 80s. And he was involved in microwave sintering, which they saw as a defense technology. And it's used to make micro gears, very small parts, because you don't have to melt the metal. You use the powder, you hit it with microwaves and heat it up, and then it will form very accurate small parts. So, but the fact is, Kobe Steel got sloppy from that. You can get all this free technology from the Soviet Union, didn't have to pay for it except a pittance and bribery, and from there I think the bad practices occurred. The other problem was...
So it had a history of doing malpractice like that.
Yeah, I mean those were special projects.
But that was 25 years ago?
Yeah, well, more than 25. But then what happened, this got transferred into the subcontractors. They started more and more leaning on their subcontractors to put out parts and components more cheaply, and this is the powder problem. That the powder requires a lot of subcontract workers. It has to be very uniform, very fine. Any holes in that, and you're going to get micro cracks in the metal of aluminum, copper, or steel. And that's the worry about the aircraft industry. Nissan uses that to make wings for Boeings. And that's not just civilian planes. We're talking about like the F-35 fighter. So this is a real threat to people flying.
Andy, I think it bothers me. A big steel plant like this, providing products to more than 400 clients, producing planes, bullet trains, and cars. How can a company not keeping its standard of quality like this?
Well, I think there's two main reasons. I think first that just the intense competition that these companies, Japan Inc., is facing. Hewlett-Packard, the co-founders of Hewlett-Packard once said that competition brings out the best in products and the worst in people. And I think that this is true in this regard, that this intense competition with the rise of China, but I think also with the realignment between the U.S. and Japan, in that for many years during the Cold War, Japan and the United States had a symbiotic relationship where in exchange for being the junior partner in the Asia-Pacific security architecture, that the United States would provide preferential market access to Japan. And now I think those dynamics have changed, and especially with regard to President Trump, I think we can see that the road ahead is getting much more difficult for Japan Inc., including companies like Kobe Steel. And I think that these roots started, as you were saying, much earlier, but I think we're now seeing kind of the apotheosis, you know, if I can use that word, of this phenomenon.
Mr. He, as Andy just mentioned, the Japanese steel makers are now facing fierce competitions from Chinese competitors. They have to move up the ladder of value. That's one theory explaining why they have been massaging their data.
Yes, there should be one of the reasons, but not the main reason. I think the Japanese steel manufacturers are facing a very strong competition, not only from China, but also from South Korea and others. So in that case, the direct reason might be in order to keep the market, to keep the customer, they just lower down the data, the standard, without being known by others. They just keep it close in the company. However, it will be closed, disclosed, and once it happens, it will be very serious.
How can a steelmaker be so careless? Because once this is found out, your reputation simply is gone. Kobe Steel didn't consider this when they are...
Well, you have to understand, intellectual property rights laws, copyright laws, has made it such that factories are sort of black boxes now. I've done a lot of industrial reporting. Very hard now to get inside, even as a friendly reporter for that industry, and they'll block off areas.
So they're betting it will never find out.
Exactly. No one can get in, and so the inspectors even probably are being blocked out of certain technology areas and are just taking the paper reports. Really problematic with copyright.
There should be some whistleblowers finding the problems happen in the production of these things.
That's what happened. The older workers who are used to the Kaizen system, where the quality control, you check your work, you have little group meetings at every stage, the Deming system, where you do your own inspection, that's all collapsed. So the older workers who are really skilled craftsmen and really put their heart, they're not well paid, but they really put their hearts and souls into their job, they're very disgusted with the management pushing them out, bringing in younger guys who don't know, and cheating. So, yeah, the whistleblowers went to the press, and that's why this thing blew.
So what did this say about the corporate governance inside Japanese companies?
Well, I think it's not just corporate governance at Japanese companies, but it's more of a global phenomenon, because it's not just, you mentioned this black box phenomenon, but it's also this quarterly earnings cycle where even at the CEO level, can we just get past this quarter? So, and I think that trickles down throughout the whole organization. And it's not just the Japanese companies. We look at VW, Volkswagen as well, having similar problems. So I think whistleblowers, institutional reform, better corporate governance, certainly I think is one way to address this. But there are, I think, very systemic issues that incentivize people at all levels of the organization to cut corners. And
But is there anything that is Japanese specific telling why so many Japanese companies have come up with problems?
Yes, that's a very good point, Andy. Yes, Japan's industry is organized under what's called a keiretsu system, where the bank, a large bank, is at the center of a whole group of industries. That used to work when the banks were willing, let's say, to get past this one quarter at a time mentality for long-term investment, improvement of these companies. But since the 2008 financial crisis, because all these banks and the larger companies were involved in derivatives, they've had to push the profits up to keep from being hit by Standards & Poor's, getting lower credit ratings. So what they've done is they've squeezed all the good companies in their groups in order to support the bad companies and the bank. So they're all propping each other up in order to keep up share values and try to get foreign investors in. And as a result, the pressure is really on the workforce to just pump stuff out, hiring more temporary workers, squeezing the subcontract. Quality's going to go down.
Of course, every company wants to best productivity and profitability, but what's the government's role in this? Isn't the Japanese government something to be blamed for Mr.
Well, the
Management?
Japanese government has been able to keep a hands-off because of this keiretsu, this combine system. The banks had this philosophy: we've got to grow our group, we've got to nurture every company, we've got to see them along for years, decades even. That has changed. The METI, the Ministry of Economy and Trade and Industry, they've sort of pulled back. There used to be strategic planning, going from shipbuildings to electronics to autos and so on. Down the line. They would manage all that, but the force for deregulation within the Japanese political class has sort of destroyed that. So the government takes a hands-off approach to industry and lets it run itself.
So basically, regulator hasn't done their jobs.
But I think another part of that is Japan traditionally has been much more of a closed economy and a closed society than, say, the United States, China, and the EU. And I think that more insular approach might also play a role, because when you open up your economy, companies, to more international standards of scrutiny, I think that can be a positive factor in avoiding some of these problems.
Let's talk about the fallout of this, because this company, steel plant, sell aluminum, steel, copper to many other companies, including Mitsubishi, Nissan, and some American companies. What's going to be the fallout if those materials they sell are not up to standard and cause some problems?
Yes. We cannot get to a conclusion by this point of time. Nonetheless, we have to follow the developments to see when all the things are evolved up, to see how many sectors, how many specific companies, and what is the chain reaction downstream of the global value chain. Then we can get to the assessment, a better assessment of the implication and aftermath. From the initial signs, we can judge that implication would be huge, not only to the direct effect to the market, to the purchase orders, but also to mentality of the customers. They will probably, many of them at least, might shift their orders to other suppliers. That will pose a threat to Kobe, but also to the threat to the image of made in Japan, and also the credibility of the products made in Japan. Because even if you are not involved, the people, the customers, the media might be suspicious because they no longer have trust in you.
So those who acquired the products of Kobe Steel, do they have second checks to ensure that these products are really have the endurance and strength they claim they have?
They don't have the technology, the testing technology, the steel industry.
So they simply believe in Kobe.
Exactly. It's all based on belief, and they've been riding on this false sense of belief from the past. And as you said, it's very well stated, Professor, the customers were willing to pay a higher price for Japanese products, Japanese resources. Because they believe. A bullet train rather than a Chinese or Canadian-made train, because it's a belief system. The Japanese train is qualitatively better. And they've just signed a huge deal with India for a high-speed train. I wonder what people in Delhi, the planners of railroad systems there, are thinking now.
I'm not a very technical savvy person, but do you think this kind of a falsification of data of strength and durability can cause serious problems for those who use those materials?
Well, if there was just one...
they're using planes and bullet trains and automobiles.
Well, the problem is, if this was a one-off, but it seems systemic, every major Japanese corporation...
And what is alarming, this actually dated back to a decade ago, which is very quite surprising.
And probably earlier than that. The workers claimed for a couple of decades. So, yeah, this has been going on, but it's across the board in Japanese industry. The airbag problem, the Toshiba problems of faking financial reports for the nuclear industry. We're finding out that Nippon Steel has made very bad forgings and castings for something like 400 parts for nuclear plants all around the world. It's jeopardized the entire nuclear industry all around the world. So we're talking about, this is not a one-off case. We're talking major industries, major products globally, and these are materials. You know, it's not like a Sony TV set. We're talking about the nuclear plant in your backyard has got Japanese.
It's a safety problem. It can cause lives.
Exactly.
And already the U.S. Justice Department has been launching an investigation into this. And many American customers are buying steel from Kobe Steel. What do you think they're going to respond to this kind of thing? And it is still ongoing.
Well, I think it still is early days, but it can have very severe repercussions, I think, for Kobe Steel. So first of all, with the Justice Department investigation, that could at the very least lead to civil suits, fines, possibly even criminal prosecution. When we look at instances, for example, with Volkswagen, I think they ended up paying something like a $2.8 billion fine. One of the senior engineers ended up going to jail. Another, I think, parallel in the United States is Enron, which also at its core was about fraud, about misstating information. And at that, even though it took years, the CEO and the chairman, Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling, both ended up going to jail. So I think these are very, very serious matters. I think if we've touched on it.
And do you think this is an Enron-level incident?
I think it's too early to say, but again, the trend is concerning, and that it's not just a one-off, and as more and more information comes out, it's gone back years and perhaps even decades, as you were saying.
And because the Tanaka company, who produces faulty airbags, basically went bankrupt because of the faulty products. Is this some thing happen again to the steel industry in Japan? That would be a huge blow to manufacturing.
Well, I think at the company level, it remains to be seen. I mean, one question is, this really strikes to the very core.
Already, it has lost 1/3 of its share value.
Yes, but it strikes really to the core of the value proposition of Japan Inc. It's high quality. You can trust products from Japan. And once that trust is damaged, I think it can be very hard to recover. And once you lose that market confidence, then financially companies do tend to spiral downwards. And I think Kobe Steel also has been exploring some sales of non-core subsidiaries to raise cash. But again, I think it's very early days, and we'll see how this all ends, how this all plays out.
Okay. Okay, later on we were talking about the impact of the Kobe Steel incident on the manufacturing in Japan and the whole world. You're now watching Dialogue on CGTN. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Okay, let's come back to our discussions. Japanese manufacturing, made in Japan. It used to be exemplar in the world. People regard made in Japan products to be high quality, with good prestige. What happened to Japanese manufacturing?
I think it's still too early to get a general conclusion to say that made in Japan is bad.
So it's still oversimplification.
First, we have to quantify to make a quantitative analysis, because the Japanese manufacturing industry has a size of $1 trillion per annum. So we see how many percentage points out of the total is involved in the falsification or in the bad quality or in the discreditability issues. Then we come to the sober analysis for the others. So can we still rely on other products made in Japan? We cannot get to the conclusion at this point. We have to wait for the developments of the events. And then we should say that if most of the Japanese products are still reliable, we should not get to the conclusion that I cannot get to the conclusion, as I mentioned. We have to make a quantified analysis before we can get to any firm conclusion.
But I think if we step back, I think Japan has really lost its manufacturing edge, because we think 10, 20 years ago, everyone wanted a Sony television, a Sony VCR, a Toshiba laptop, a Panasonic refrigerator, washing machine. And today, all of these Japanese brands really are not market or technology leaders anymore. And I think that is also contributing to this pressure to cut corners, because when you're no longer the leader, you can't charge a premium. So
they're trying to find their niche market, which is considered added value, good quality, but is not up to that expectation. That's the problem.
Yes. So I mean, now we look at Lenovo computers, laptops, higher home appliances, and televisions. So I think that's put enormous pressure on Japan Inc. and really created a lot of pressure. Now they can only compete mostly on price, and then that creates this pressure to cut corners.
sophistication of their technologies.
But less so, though. I mean, I think that's the point, because it used to be Sony had the best technology in televisions. Today, you know, it's certainly not.
So, Yuichi, what do you think the Japanese industrialists should do if they want to reintegrate their manufacturing?
I don't think it's going to be easy, because there are enough scandals now in Japan, which are very much trusted as a quality leader, to, I think, shake up the entire global quality assurance system. You know, a lot of this was based on trust that the major manufacturers would hold to these standards. Now it looks like maybe the U.S. and European bureaus of standards, you know, the testing labs.
So you're losing
CE,
out because of
words,
competition,
CE,
or because you're losing your
you know,
reputation?
CE on your electrical products, for example, that all the other countries, major importers of Japanese goods, are going to do their own quality testing on Japanese products. This is really going to shake up the whole world system. If that starts, if everyone has to check products from another country because they think they might be cheating. This is, you know, there was a global system. I think maybe that's shattered now.
But Andy's question is why the Japanese manufacturing is losing the edge it used to enjoy.
Oh, no, see, the problem, Japan is very good at perfecting a product that's already known, you know, where we already have the design. But when it comes to creativity, however, a creative application, you see, well, Toshiba versus Apple. Who's more creative? Everyone wants an iPhone, okay? Toshiba's out of the phone business. So basically, the kind of qualities, especially younger consumers want, are from a whole different way of looking. And quality there is not, technological quality is not the main criteria. It's more your apps, your software, because an iPhone doesn't last 10 years like an old computer does.
Many people blame the Japanese manufacturing system is insulated from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It's developing on its own model and systems.
Try to use a phone in Japan.
So that's why it's not catching
no other
on
phone
with
in
the
the
rest of the world.
no other phone in the world works in Japan. You've got to get a
But
Japanese
you never have
phone.
second thoughts about that.
Well, I always do. I said,
I
why
mean,
am I
the
paying so
Japanese
much for my phone bill
decision
in
makers
Japan?
and business leaders.
Why does the internet cost me so much per month in Japan? So if you're in Japan, yes, the Japanese have a lot of complaints. I go outside the country, life is so easy, going from country to country, so much faster and cheaper.
I would go even further, though, to say that I think Japan, why it had the technology leadership for a number of years, because they had a leg up from the United States, because as I mentioned earlier, in exchange for this military alliance, that Japan had easy access to the American market.
You mean in the 70s and 80s?
Yes, yes. So not just for automobiles, but consumer electronics, all these other areas that Japan has excelled. And now I think that with China catching up, and also now the change with the Trump administration becoming, I think, much less open overall to international trade, but I think especially singling out countries like Japan and South Korea for their persistent trade deficits, that it's going to be very, very difficult just because now Japan is competing on a more level playing field with the rest of the world. And I think in particular, if we look at the Chinese companies, there's an enormous domestic market that is 3 times the U.S. market. These companies are here with access to more than adequate capital, increasingly sophisticated homegrown technology, and the ability to cycle very quickly through meeting consumer preferences. That I think it's going to be hard really for any companies, but especially, and I hate to be so negative, but especially for Japanese companies to catch up.
But do you think, Mr. He, any lessons we should learn from the Chinese manufacturers? Because China is a big manufacturing country, and we are moving up the ladder of value to be more sophisticated.
Yes.
What should we learn from the lessons of
Yes,
Kobe?
I think we should learn seriously lessons before we get happy. But many people in China are quite happy to say that, oh, okay, Japan is over, now this chance for China. Okay, in a sense, that might be, because some of the orders might be shifted to China. But we have to first seriously consider the lessons, because the 19th Party Congress just called on change of development from the development of speed to development of quality. Then by quality we means we must have the top quality products. And that we should think seriously, how can we avoid the similar mistakes? The first of all, we should have a very good management, quality management system. We should also learn from the past Japanese experience of total quality control. And also we should guard against any loopholes in the system to be resulted in any fraud or any cheating. So
like the strong urge of the Japanese manufacturer to doctor the data so that it claims to be better than it is actually is.
How can we avoid that? We must build a very strong system, and also we should change or improve our corporate governance to make it more open, to be supervised by the third party, by the society, that might be added to the safety of our products.
And let's also talk a little bit about the Japanese-Chinese momentum. It seems Japanese and Chinese are more and more in competition in manufacturing. Japanese is selling its bullet trains, China is doing the same. It seems they're competing, but not only in technology and finance and everything. What do you make of this?
That's really funny, because I think 20 years ago you would expected sort of a merger of Japan and China with a currency merger. I mean, people were talking big about East Asian
The relative strength is different back then.
I mean, if 20 years ago you said Japan and China would be completely like a great wall between them, and caused by both sides, built by both sides, I think people would have been stunned to hear that. They expected more integration of the and also a sorting out of the functions. That hasn't happened. It's retreat. I think that's because China has advanced so rapidly.
You think it is a pity that they...
No, it's not a pity. Look at the number of university graduates you have in the United States, Europe, Australia, Canada, versus the number of Japanese PhDs. It's 50 times more. You've got the human capital, the intellectual capital, has far surpassed Japan. And people maybe who don't have the prejudices, are not carrying the baggage, aren't sponsored by rich industrial families, but are out there on their own.
It seems you're spelling a decline of Japanese economy.
It's called competition. The Chinese are just, out surpassing us now for different reasons. They have a larger population, more education. The respect for education is much greater in China.
But isn't it a better case if the Japanese and the Chinese cooperate more like it used to do?
Yes, that will create some chances for us to cooperate with the Japanese companies, because we still have a lot to learn from the Japanese advantages in
because
technology.
In the 1980s and 90s,
not only 1990s, but now still we can learn quite a lot from the Japanese technology and their cutting edge research and development. I think there's plenty of room for us to cooperate with Japan. An important thing is that we do not have just a one-sided view that say that Japan is nothing now, and that would not be good for us to develop.
Don't underestimate the Japanese momentum. And Andy, from an American perspective, how do you view the economic, technological competition and transaction between the two major East Asian powers?
Well, again, I think to go back to this idea of what the co-founder of Hewlett-Packard said, competition brings out the best in products and the worst in people. I think it should be encouraged to have better products and services, higher quality products and services. But the negative aspects of competition, where it creates these incentives to cut corners, to do unethical things, needs to be managed. And I think this is where I think China has a very interesting and valuable perspective and model to offer the world, because if we're only quarterly earnings driven, only driven by profits, I think that can lead to some negative results. But China, where I think it's a hybrid system, where it's really the market is an engine to drive prosperity. Yes, but also a balanced view, So it's not just about profits, but it's also delivering real benefits for society.
Because balance and sustainable growth is the real growth. All right, thank you very much, Andy. Thank you, Yuqi, and thank you, Mr. He. You've been watching Dialogue on CGTN. I'm Joe in Beijing. Goodbye.